Hey everybody, welcome back to the Barbell Medicine YouTube channel or podcast, wherever you're catching this. I'm Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum. This is part 2 from our Santa Cruz training camp. This is a question and answer session with Dr. Austin Baraki and myself. Hope you guys enjoy this 45 minutes of high quality information. So sit tight and we'll catch you guys at the end.
So question was that she had a history of frozen shoulder, you said 5 years ago? Yeah, so frozen shoulder is possibly the most bizarre musculoskeletal condition that exists. We have no earthly idea why or how frozen shoulder happens, why it takes so long to get better, how to treat it. We've tried all kinds of crazy shit to treat frozen shoulder. Doesn't seem to help. We just know that most people over the course of the first anywhere from 1 to 3 years ultimately end up getting better, as you did. So I am not going to be able to provide a very satisfying explanation as to why or how it happened or how it works, because nobody on earth understands it. But happy to hear that you have gotten most of your range of motion back, that you can train, you can press, you can bench. I wouldn't search for things to be wrong. I would just keep training and enjoy the fact that you recovered and you can keep using your shoulder. And
yeah, I probably wouldn't do anything about it. Yeah.
You might find that it continues to improve and one day you can get even more range of motion through training. You may not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is frozen shoulder seen on radiology or anything?
Nope. Clinical diagnosis.
Yeah.
After excluding things, radiographically sometimes.
The question is about new templates and new programming sort of guidelines. Have we found any trends that will affect how the new programs are distributed, written, etc.? Very broadly, not really. Mainly because going into when making the initial set of templates and as they've been refined going along, is that volume needs to be driven up over time, progressively in a manner that's tolerable, and outside of that, inter-individual differences in training are individual, and so people may respond to more or less average intensity, more or less exposure to singles, better or worse to certain variations, but on the whole, the biggest sort of thing that I've found through analyzing this stuff is that when I ramp the volume up stepwise versus going from periods of pretty low volume to just, here you go, blast, people do better with the gradual ramp. And that's what you would expect just based on what we know about, the recovery response and stuff like that. But I have found that even when I am looking at a program, I go, wow, that volume that's high. But people do just fine if you gradually have gotten them there, and then they do better. The only new thing that is really kind of, I now believe, is that the lower end of the intensity ranges that are useful for driving strength is, in that 70%, maybe even a little lower, 67, 70%, which had you asked me this 5 years ago, I would have said 75, 70, closer to 80, but now I'm lower, and I program that as such. So before, where I would be heavily reliant on sets at RP 8, I'm totally fine with starting at 7, for instance, and doing 4 sets of 6 at RP 7. And people are like, "Well, it's only RP 7, man." I'm like, "Yeah, it's like 70%, 71%." And they're like, "But is that enough?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it'll be fine." So as far as special populations, that was kind of the last aspect. That's going to be the biggest troll template. It's going to be the women's template. It's just going to be the dude's template with a different name on it. If anything, our expectation would be that women who exhibit traditionally feminine traits, right? So we're talking more narrow shoulders, less lean body mass, wider hips, less ability to recruit motor units quickly, right? So they have lower vertical jumps. So the non-athletic female, but lower on the athletic spectrum, would require more training to get
a given outcome.
a given improvement in strength. So the women's template, for instance, is likely to have more volume at a slightly higher average intensity, but nothing like crazy. Interestingly, if we made an older person template, it would look the same, which is, interesting.
How old is it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, so when we were talking about this on our
Not
podcast.
35.
No, it's
The
not.
question is, how old is old?
So
Being male or female?
right, so I have it on good authority. The person himself is 26-year-old male who was on old man Texas method because that's what you do. You're just not you're not young anymore. You gotta recover or not train enough. So that's the risk. The old is a biological thing. It's not a chronological thing. I mean, even defining what is elderly in the medical literature is a problem, and people go back and forth on this all the time, and they seem to have settled around 65 and say, we'll call this. If you're 66, you're old, and if you're 65, you're not. But this is more of a biological sort of thing. So the biological processes involved in aging that affect training outcomes specifically would be blood flow, right? As it relates to protein absorption in the GI tract and blood supply to the muscle and stuff like that. So when does that happen? Well, it could happen at a young age for somebody with a bunch of vascular problems, or it could happen at old age, or it could never happen.
I think it's general. I think you can summarize our position. I think I said this to somebody recently by saying that there are no special populations.
Right.
Because if everybody is a special population, then nobody's a special population.
Yeah.
And so there is nothing inherent to somebody telling me I am this age or I am male or I'm female that specifically guides what I'm going to do. And that is specifically due to the broad, enormous range of inter-individual variation in response, right? So as an example, I'm going to brag on Brian, right? Who, can I say your age? You're what, 53? 53. Started training, what, a year and a half ago? 14 months ago, started training. He has gone through most of our templates. He has smashed the hell out of our templates. He did the 12-week press template.
Barbellmedicine.com.
Leading into strength lifting nationals, went and squatted 485, pressed 205, 209, and pulled 465. So, he should, within the next 6 months, squat 500, press 225, pull over 500, right? So I can brag on him and say, look what this program does for you. That's what most people in fitness marketing land would say, right?
Yeah.
This program took this 53-year-old guy to a 500-pound squat in under 18 months. Buy it. Which would be very disingenuous of me and dishonest, right? Yeah. But I can say that because I can say, hey, he is shockingly sensitive to training.
Yes.
Whereas I could pick out some other 53-year-old who may be in the room right now, I don't know, or someone off the street who will respond nowhere even close to that. They'll train for 18 months to get to a 250 squat, if that. You know what I mean? And so the fact that they're 53 tells me nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing unique.
I can make an assumption that you're old and you're broken and you're not going to recover and you don't adapt, and I can tell you these things and make you believe these things, and that becomes your reality because you interpret every ache and pain that you feel as confirmation that I'm old and broken and can't adapt. Or I can not do that shit and get you better outcomes, right, by addressing this whole other side of training, adaptation, fatigue management, all the stuff that we talk about, by not making you feel like you are broken.
Hey man, you don't know. You never been.
I care about this a little bit.
You never been old.
Right? So
You just don't know
same
yet.
thing applies to a female, right? Can have a female say, "Oh, you're not really going to adapt. Sorry." And then I take my wife and I coach her, and she pulls 405 in under 18 months of training. That's way faster progress than I got. So am I more of a female than she is from an adaptability standpoint?
From a trainer, maybe.
She must have used
Yes.
that.
Yes.
She used the template.
Because
Right,
I did
she's
not
on.
deadlift 405 that soon after I started training. So the fact that she's female means nothing when it comes to training. You have to observe the response and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, that's like we say the thing tongue in cheek. It just doesn't matter if you're female, if you're old, whatever. None of that tells us enough information to make adjustments in training without looking at empirical evidence from you. The empirical evidence from another group of people who do not represent you doesn't change what we do.
Yeah.
I have every expectation that you're gonna, you'll go squat 500 until proven otherwise, so.
And I think that's where, we talk about, people are like, well, what can I expect from this program? And I'm like,
Yeah, you
I
can
hope it works for you. But if you come back and you tell me I did it and I confirm that you did it quote unquote right and you didn't really respond or you got weaker, and I'm like, well, you're on that end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
If we did a randomized trial, right? If we did a randomized trial of our templates or something like that, we take a huge cohort of the population, we could get a great idea of what the average response to the program is. But if you take individual data points, individual subject data points, and say starting strength, ending strength,
That's our next book. It's an ending
you
strength.
show where they started and where they ended up. You're going to have lines going up, you're going to have lines going down, and then you're going to see the average.
Yeah.
Which is what you can report, but it's not useful when it comes to prescribing programming to the individual. You do the novice LP, the program that works every time,
Come on, don't do it with the eyes.
right? And you put 1,000 people on the program, and you run it out to the end, and you get the starting data points and the ending data points. You're going to have people who got way stronger, you're going to have people that didn't really respond, right? And you're going to have your average response. It's the way every single intervention that you can do to a person works. You give 1,000 people blood pressure medicine, spectrum of response in blood pressure lowering, right? Another diabetic medicine, spectrum of response in blood sugar lowering. Just too much variability.
Are you saying that my training sensitivity idea is elegant?
Yes,
Oh, man.
broadly applicable.
Oh, man. Yeah, the only last thing I'll say on this, so from our group programming, we have just a little over 500 different data points from the various months and people. And thus far, less than 10% of all people that we've come across, less than 10% are the folks who I would call non-responders to our initial level of management, meaning that across the board, they have not PR'd within the first month. Okay, so that being said, we have a 90% approximately success rate of people who will add weight to their PR within the first month, which is a pretty good percentage rate. That doesn't mean that they're PRing at the most optimal sort of, maximum rate that they could, but I'm okay batting 900, off the bat, which tells me that we're on the right track as far as our line of thinking goes to program management. So, yeah. Yeah, so the question is, how important is protein variety under the assumption that you're getting a high amount of protein in? No one knows. I can't tell you that any data suggesting that people who eat a higher variety of high quality protein do better than those who eat no variety of high quality protein. I can tell you that on average, people with the highest amount of essential amino acid intake per day tend to have the highest amount of lean body mass, but as far as does the variety matter? My only caveat with recommending whey for this is it, only protein source, is that some folks will, with whey protein concentrate in particular, have an abnormal response cholesterol-wise. Yeah, well, I have no concerns with someone eating nearly the same thing on a daily basis, provided that they're healthy based on any metric that we can track, which would be weight, waist, body composition. Is their lipid panel normal? They don't have any problems with their blood sugar. All that stuff being equal, I don't care. The question is, should you do prehab, and why do people do it? Austin, I will ask you the first part. Should you do prehab?
No.
No. Good.
Can I explain why?
Yeah, sure.
So when you're going to do the prehab exercises under the guise that they are fixing some structural thing that is then predisposing you to injury, that does not appear to be a significant risk here for injury. So the ways to reduce the risk of injury, because we can't prevent them, we can reduce the risk of them, is manage training fatigue, i.e. reducing or managing the session RPE. So not all of your sessions are at 10, at 10, at 10, right? And paying attention to how much training you're doing so that we don't do something stupid with your acute on chronic workload ratio. That's how you reduce the risk for injuries. So, and then just strengthening the athlete, general strength, is another thing that we can do to reduce the risk for injury. So to the extent that prehab things work, it works by way of making you stronger. If it's not making you stronger, then it's a waste of time, which I would argue that most of the exercises that are advertised as prehab exercises are wastes of time when it comes to getting you stronger anyway, compared to more useful ways of getting somebody strong.
Yep. So as far as why do people do them, they are fashionable, right? I mean, you have a big social learning aspect to this, right? People who you hold in high regard, or high esteem, or you value what they have to say, do this stuff, or at least say they do it on social media so they can make that extra $200 a month. It seems worth selling their soul. There's no good reason otherwise than somebody told you to do it who you hold in high regard. And it's bullshit. It's harmful, right? Because if you don't do it, and this person told you that you got to do it if you want to, not get injured, well, what do they just do to you? They just noceboed you. Are they your friend? Why don't you just give them the money directly to not send you the message, right? Let's start a GoFundMe so that these kids don't have to sell jigsaw massagers on Instagram.
Because the default message coming from these people is that you are broken.
You're broken.
Even before you start training, you have to fix these things.
You need to be fixed.
Right? Whereas,
and you need to pay me to get fixed.
Whereas you look at the actual data on this stuff, pain, injury, stuff like that, and there's so much of this idea of resilience, self-efficacy, being able to take care of yourself, autonomy in training and stuff like that, that we're here telling you, you're good, man.
You're fine.
Great shape.
Let's get stronger.
Go to town.
Yeah.
So we're building you up.
Yeah, we're your friends. We're your friends.
So yes.
Unless you eat grains, in which case, not our friends. The question is there a minimum age before, or that someone should be before that you introduce weight training? No, not necessarily. The answer is it depends on, again, biology, right? So we use Tanner stages, but that's not evidence-based. That's based in like Russian sports science and China's sports science, based on what they did with their athletic universities and selecting their athletes. So what they would do is once you were a certain Tanner stage, which is basically a stage of development that occurs, there's 5 of them. Once you're a certain Tanner stage, you were able to participate in sports, right? As far as us, what do we know about the risks of weight training in kids, children? Low. The biggest risk is dropping a dumbbell or a weight on your foot. Seriously, the injury rate for resistance training is remarkably low. Like, almost so low that you're like, did anybody really study this? Or they just guess. Like, even for competitive weightlifting. So when should you start, or when is it okay for somebody's kid to start lifting weights? Any age is fine as long as they're mature enough in the weight room such that there's a lower risk of them dropping a dumbbell or a weight on their own foot or somebody else's foot, because that would be bad. But I don't have any minimum, and I don't have any minimum like stage of development. I just think that if a kid wants to train or start lifting weights, that's fine. I'm under no belief that they have a higher risk of injury than somebody who's older. I have no evidence to suggest that it's going to stunt their growth. I have no evidence to suggest it's going to lead to bad outcomes down the line, other than participation in a wide variety of sports and different movement patterns and different skills at a young age is likely to set them up for success in athletics and other recreational pursuits that are physical in nature.
And there is evidence that strength training reduces their injury risk when it comes to playing those sports.
Yeah, just overall, in general. Yep. So how young is too young? It depends on the
maturity of the kid.
Yeah, maturity of the kid. Yeah, maybe I should ask.
So the question had to do with our UpToDate article, and if we've seen any data to know about maybe access data, if it's been how much it's been read or anything like that. Yeah, we don't know. I'm sure they have like view data or something. I don't know how much that reflects it being read and internalized.
How many hits are we getting?
Yeah. So
I don't know. I'll ask John.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll ask. That's good. That's good. Cool.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
the idea is that we are probably going to end up taking that stuff and then expanding it out.
Barbell medicine book.
Basically, because it hasn't been addressed. The topics in that article had to do with resistance training in this condition, and then, have seemingly become the people that people go to when they're like, hey, I have this condition, can I train?
Yeah.
To which the answer is usually yes. But
hold on. What's the weirdest thing that somebody's asked you if they can train with?
I'm not good at these questions, man.
Arnold Chiari.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a hard one.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Arnold Chiari's this
It's a
particular type.
brainstem malformation.
Yeah, like they're lacking, and there's a risk of them herniating their brain through the opening by which the brain becomes a spinal cord.
Yeah.
And this guy was like, "Yeah, can my sister train?" And I was like,
Yes, I have nothing to base this on. So that's the
"I
point.
hope so." I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, universally yes. If you have ever thought about playing like recreational soccer or like adult league, like beer league kickball, then you're at an infinitely higher risk of injury. Yes. Like the odds of you getting injured from while training, provided that you don't enter training under, guidance that you should max out every set all the time, grind it out, take it to the limit, otherwise you're a bad person. Odds are you'll probably be fine. But should you enter into that belief system, well, things might be a little different, although still relatively low comparatively. For sure, of course not. Nobody skips on the. Excuse me, can I eat more protein instead of less carbs? The question is, if you have undereaten throughout the day and you're going to make it up at one more meal, should you eat the same amount of protein that you've been prescribed, or should you eat less protein and ramp up the other macros while keeping in mind that you're going to hit enough to generate a muscle protein synthesis response? My default answer is just hit the macros. And the reason why is that it'd be very difficult for me to tell you that there would be a significant difference in eating less protein but more carbs and fat, or vice versa. It's not going to matter. In fact, I'd make the argument that the most important thing is the calories, first and foremost, and then as a secondary concern would be, well, how are those divvied up? But since we're talking about a large meal that ultimately is going to bring you to your caloric goal, that I'm not worried about this meal being like devoid of protein or ability to generate a muscle protein synthesis response. A meal that's high enough in calories, unless it's pure fat, is likely to generate a muscle protein synthesis response, even in the absence of protein, provided you're not completely fasted, which you're not, because you've eaten earlier today. So my response in an acute setting would be just, hit the macros. If you're off by, 20 grams less of protein and you add that to your carbs and the calories work out the same, I'm fine with it, But for one day, one meal, I don't think it matters enough to worry about outside of calories. Make sense? Just in the same way, I don't think that matters if you eat 3 times a day or 5 times a day for muscle protein synthesis concerns. I think the more important thing is, do you hit your calorie goal on average each day over the course of a week or 2 weeks? So people are like, well, five times a day is better because it's more. Like, okay,
We don't
prove
really
it.
have the evidence for that.
Yeah, we don't have evidence that whey protein works. Truthfully, if you really want to if you want to hold everything to the same standard that people want to, people want to claim on certain, science, interventions, there's no long-term data suggesting that whey protein, increases people's lean body mass when they resistance train, because no one's ever studied that long-term. Haven't, no one said, yeah, let's do it for 5 years. We have people who lift weights regularly and people who, take protein and other people who don't. We don't have any data showing that they have more lean body mass or they got stronger in that amount of time frame. We have it at 3 months, but you're like, yeah, you could easily say, well, that's 3 months. What does it matter? I'm like, yeah, that's fair. That being said, I do think that whey protein can be useful in certain cases, so I just want to know what you're going to eat tonight. Yeah,
It's gonna be epic.
Same. Yeah, right. All right. You would go to Teresa. I have seen. Okay, so the question is thoughts on ketogenic diet and strength training. I have seen people who have previously been very strong continue to be relatively strong whilst on a ketogenic diet. There are a handful of trials assessing athletic performance with a ketogenic diet. One was in gymnasts, one was in Taekwondo players, Taekwondo people, and this is under the premise that they need to lose weight to make weight for a thing. Or in the gymnasts, it was like they lost a little weight and could do the same amount of pull-ups, so they didn't get any weaker. I haven't seen any, anecdotally, the general response to people when they train and don't and eat a ketogenic diet is they don't do as well as they otherwise would. And I say that based on the repeated sort of a question like, hey, I've been on a ketogenic diet. I'm not really losing that much weight. I'm eating 200 grams of fat per day. Also, my squat is stuck at 190 pounds. I'm a 240-pound guy. What do you recommend I do? Well, all right. You haven't been in a calorie deficit, but you've underperformed on the squat relative to our normative data. Normal data says that on a starting strength LP, you should end up in a mid to upper 200-pound squat for 3 sets of 5. So you're underperformed, and it hasn't helped you lose any weight, and it's put you at risk for a lipid problem. People who are already strong, people who are using other things may do fine on a ketogenic diet. You can use it short term for weight loss if you need to, and that helps you comply. But I do not think that there are any unique health benefits to the ketogenic diet outside of maybe diabetics who otherwise can't comply with the diet. I don't think that it's uniquely useful for sporting applications. Evidence to suggest that there is woefully lacking. And I think that there are significant risks with doing the ketogenic diet. And if it worked as well as all the pro keto folks were saying, then we would see better results with it when it's tested. But it's just like everything else. People are probably not going to do very well with it. Some people thrive on it, but
yeah, the other thing is your question was, have you ever seen anybody on keto get strong? To which I would first ask, what is strong? Right? So where's our cutoff? Have I seen somebody on keto get a 225 squat? Sure. I wouldn't consider that to be very strong. 315, 405, when do we say that they've gotten strong on the diet? That's one weird kind of thing, right? The other thing is that strength adaptations, I hope you will agree at this point, is highly complex, multifactorial, and so to pick out the diet as your isolated variable and expect that to be reflected in these like kind of profound differences in adaptation, it's going to be confounded by a bunch of other shit, right? So you could have somebody who is highly training sensitive, super freak athlete, you put him on a keto diet, is he going to get strong? Probably. Would he get stronger if he wasn't? Also probably, right? Or you could have somebody who is, really, really horribly training resistant. Are they going to do well on a keto diet? Probably not.
they probably wouldn't have done well on any
They
other
probably
diet.
wouldn't have done well anyway, right? So that's the thing, is first what is strong, and then it's confounded by too many other things anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think that if you're trying to give yourself every advantage during training, then we're going to follow our best practices, which are a relatively high protein diet. You're going to have carbohydrates around your workout time. You may use certain supplements that have some proven benefit. You're going to train using a progressively overloaded fashion. You're not going to try to game the system and do too many weird things that are like haven't substantiated themselves over time. And I think ketogenic kind of falls into that. Yeah. The question is, to my knowledge, can I add enough lean body mass where I'll actually be able to eat more calories than I am now whilst losing weight? Probably not. So you have a few things working against you. And I don't mean to be that guy, but I'll be that guy today. Losing weight means that at whatever body weight you are in the future, you're likely to have a lower TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure, or basal metabolic rate, than somebody who didn't have to lose weight but was your same height and body weight. Basically, you're going to be a few hundred calories lower than them because you had to go from a higher body weight to a lower body weight. So you're going to be 300, 400 calories less than them just to maintain your weight. If you gain a bunch of muscle mass, then your body weight's going to be higher. Will you be eating more calories than you were to get up to that body weight the first time? Maybe if you surpass that weight. If you were 220 when you started or 230 when you started, and then you lost a bunch of weight, got down to 200, and then regained a ton of muscle mass, and now you're at 240, you'd probably be eating more calories. But the odds of you going down to 200 and then gaining 40 pounds of lean body mass, well,
Short of any kind of
correct.
chemistry.
A lot of chemistry would be involved there. So that seems unlikely. If you build a little bit more muscle mass, you might close that gap down. And then also, just the more you train, on average, you'll have a little more extra wiggle room with your activity level, provided that represents a significant portion of your day. Does that make sense?
no, it totally does.
So it's unlikely that you'll be able to eat significantly more than you are now without starting to gain a little bit of weight, unless your activity also goes up.
Yeah.
Until you, if you have the same amount of muscle mass as me, your calories are going to be up. So I would say that, if you get jacked, but that may require periods of time where you're heavier, Yeah. So let's get abs for the summer first, and then reassess. But the important part is to kind of figure out what you need for maintenance and be able to comply with that within a given period of time, and then you can adjust. So most folks will be like, I don't want to eat this little, and then they just permabulk, and then you end up the waist is 40 inches, and you're like, look, man.
That's the thing that I point out is the article that I wrote for the site a month or two ago on metabolism.
Which medicine was that?
What?
Which medicine was that?
Empagliflozin.
Yeah, it was like I knew there's a flozin in there.
Yes. So it was just a study to summarize, like a placebo-controlled weight loss study using a medicine that will result in weight loss kind of without really the patient having to decrease their usual intake, because it makes you pee out sugar. So you pee out energy, you lose weight, and they compared it to a placebo. And they noted that as time went on, their weight plateaued, even though they were still peeing out the same amount of sugar. So they should have still been in an energy deficit. Then they measured their intake, and their intake rose to match the energy deficit because of neurological mechanisms for appetite. So people ended up naturally increasing their intake to match the extra energy expenditure, so their weight plateaued instead of continuing to go down linearly, as you would expect. And they ended the article with a quote that I really liked, having to do with how basically, in order to achieve kind of like long-term weight loss success, people have to use heroic measures, basically, to be able to maintain that calorie deficit in the face of neurological, physiological mechanisms that are fighting you to make you increase your intake, right? Because your body perceives it as, why are you wasting away, bro? Right? And so the heroic mechanisms that are required to maintain a calorie deficit is why, we see people who lose weight and they gain it back. It's hard to do. Yeah. That's why, we prescribe sometimes like weight loss type medications to reduce the RPE of dieting, to make it not as hard, because it works on the brain to reduce appetite, cravings, things like that. So
you listen to the podcast with Nadolski?
Yeah.
The second one and the third one I think were really helpful. But anyway, we'll lose the fat now, get jacked, strong AF. Do you want to summarize the question?
So the question is, do we as physicians foresee or have concerns about possible health implications of people in the modern physical culture scene gaining a bunch of body weight, body mass, using the modern food supply and all its potential problems with pesticides, et cetera, things people are concerned about?
So my answer is no, not really. As far as from the question that you asked was about the food supply. I have no concerns over GMOs because we've been genetically modifying things since the start of agriculture. Heirloom seeds are pretty rare. I'm not concerned with GMOs and things that are generally regarded as safe per fairly rigorous testing. I'm more concerned with the pharmaceutical arms race that is strength sports or sports in general, mainly because it happens under a veil in the alleyways and in the in the locker room, rather without physician supervision. So you have athletes with high incentives to perform at supernatural levels, all right, that are on their own without any sort of education on what should you be checking, what should you be taking, and they're going to do it anyway. And we just call that cheating, even though all sports are unfair. I think I'm more concerned with people with the drug culture than GMOs or protein supplements or anything like that. I'm more concerned with people using multiple pharmaceutical compounds to gain a performance advantage, which has happened since the beginning of time with respect to sport. First it was alcohol, then it was strychnine, and then it was thyroid hormone.
Anything we could get our hands on.
Yeah, it's like, this thing might work. Cool, let's do a ton of it. So I'm more concerned with that because what you see, like as the record, particularly in strength sports, right, records continue to fall, and these people are larger than life, and I'm less concerned with the food supply than I am the pharmaceutical chemistry it took to get there. And I think that needs to be addressed via education and this sort of open door policy rather than, well, we'll just test 10% of our competitive population, bust a few people, and people stop using. As the incentives continue to go up, I think you're going to see more of that, and you'll see more people hurt themselves. But and then the second thing I'm more concerned about than lifters, for instance, or strength athletes gaining weight via our food supply is obesity.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was going to get at. Like,
I mean, that's the biggest problem, and the source of obesity, to me, has less to do with our food supply than the psychological,
psychosocial
environment.
Yeah.
You say environment at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah, my biggest concerns are kind of the pandemics that we have now, arguably being obesity and, at the other end of the spectrum, frailty, right? So those are things that we know we can deal with pretty effectively through at least the training and dietary nutrition measures that we recommend. And so, yeah, so if I can, because we know we have very compelling evidence on the harms, right, of obesity, very compelling evidence on the harms of frailty, sarcopenia, osteosarcopenia, things like that as folks get older. It's like we have these interventions that we can do. And I can see kind of the concern of like, well, are you creating one problem by solving another? But there is not a complete absence of data on the things that you mentioned, like the concerns about GMO and stuff like that. And so based on the evidence we have now, those things are not of huge concern for, general population consumption or, aspartame or something like that being a huge problem. Tom is a big fan of aspartame, right? Well, but we have evidence on the interventions we can do to solve today's, epidemics of, these major health problems. So
yeah, I think there are too many examples in history of us being cautious. Like we're just being cautious about stuff, and like we're taking trace mercury out of vaccines, which ultimately killed a bunch of people who could no longer get the hepatitis vaccine, and subsequently with kids, and subsequently got liver cancer and died. Or we stopped using DDT, and then millions of people died from malaria. Like, even though DDT could have been, it's been shown to be safe. So, but we get these general caution, we're like, I feel bad about this, and that's championed by somebody who's maybe not necessarily super steeped in the research, and then we make bad decisions based on it. So,
I would point out DDT was not both primarily
well, animal and health, and the animal concerns from Rachel Carson, yes. Yes, and then potential implications, our kids and our animals, and turns out millions of people then subsequently died from malaria, but it's fine. We got, should have thought about this. So I think I don't want to be overly cautious about things that may lead to future harm. And my main concerns right now with respect to our diet or the culture that we're in is the Pandora's box that is PED use in sport, and nobody's doing anything about it that's helpful right now, in my opinion, and then obesity. So, and when I say that nobody's doing anything helpful about it, is that we're just going to test it and say it's bad. It's like, every year more and more people are using this stuff, and more people are going to potentially hurting themselves with this stuff. And what are you doing about it? Because the cost of getting caught is not high enough, obviously.
You see the lengths that the Russians went to in Icarus, right? That's all you need to see. People are going to find a way to make this shit happen.
Yeah. Well, because that is the norm now, and
you don't get a lifetime ban for popping positive.
That's true, and maybe you should, or
Ilya,
maybe you should,
Ilya 2020, bro.
Or maybe you should legalize it.
He's gonna clean and jerk 250.
Yeah, Ilya, as a vegan, is going to clean and jerk 250 kilos in the 105 kilo weight class, or 106, whatever it is now, after popping positive for every Olympics that he's been in. Totally. I hope he wins.
Yeah, be fun to watch.
All right, so thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you guys want to learn how to submit your own questions or submit a form check for us for our YouTube vlogs, you can check out the description below. Subscribe for all the latest content. Hit like if you dug the video. Share it with your friends. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.